In this video, I'm going to show you Sigma. This is a new open source tool set that is being used everywhere in security operations centers to basically translate quickly indicators of compromise into a query that works with whatever tool set you're using in your SOC. This is going to be awesome if you're already working in a SOC and if you're going to a job interview for a SOC and you tell them that you are familiar with Sigma, or even better, because we're going to be walking through exactly how to use it, that you know how to use it, I guarantee you it's going to be a key differentiator for you as a candidate. Coming up. Hey everybody, welcome to SimplyCyber, the YouTube channel designed to help you make and take a cybersecurity career further, faster. I'm your host, Gerald Ozier, and on this channel, we are talking cybersecurity labs, techniques, industry, career certifications. If any of that is interesting to you, considering check out the other videos on the channel or maybe hit and subscribe. We post content every single Monday. So in this episode, we are talking about Sigma. Now, I've heard people talking about this. Whenever I encounter another colleague who I haven't seen in a while, and we're bullshitting and sharing notes about work and what's new and stuff like that, like there's a 50-50 shot they're going to mention Sigma, or I'm going to mention Sigma to them. So it's really got this kind of like groundswell. Now, what is Sigma? Sigma is this open source tool. It's basically an executable, but what it ends up allowing you to do is very easily share kind of indicators of compromise or signatures that you can look for in your environment for malicious behavior and activity very quickly with the community. So it's basically like a Rosetta Stone for security operations centers. So what I've done in today's video is I have engaged John Hoyt, who is a good friend of mine and an excellent blue teamer. Okay, he's a manager of a security operations center. He's been doing it for years. Very, very knowledgeable, very, very good. He's also got a YouTube channel, which I'll link in the show notes below. He just started it a few months ago. I encourage you to go check it out if you like what John's saying. Now, John has been using Sigma, so he actually decided to come on the show and show us how he's using it in his environment and actually how to basically run it for particular use cases. So we're going to take a look at that today. But what I want you to really take away for that job interview and be able to speak about Sigma is that basically you can have a signature for like this SolarWinds thing that's going on right now, right? You can have a signature defined, and it uses basically a kind of a common format, if you will, right? So you define that, you post it up to the GitHub, which Florian Roth, by the way, thank you Florian Roth, who's the author of this tool. You have this bank of signatures, right? So you might not even have to write one. I bet you there's one for SolarWinds there right now. I'm going to go back after the video's done video editing and put a pop-up right here probably of that. But that aside, if there's already one there, no matter if you're using Graylog or Splunk or, whatever SIEM you're using, right? You can pull that signature down, push it through Sigma, and tell Sigma what SIEM you're using, and it will generate a query that is language specific to your SIEM. So what you do is, instead of like wasting time, this is a time saver app. That's what this is, right? You can quickly copy paste whatever the custom query is, drop it in your SIEM, save it as a defined query or set it as an alertable query, right? And have it running in your environment. So very, very quickly, you can go from notification that there is this threat out there and a signature for it to looking for it in your environment or being able to detect it in your environment, right? So this is very powerful, and this is the reason why there's such a groundswell on it, because it's awesome, right? Being able to see everything and have extra time or not waste time on signatures and then troubleshoot it and stuff like that, that's where the value is. So let's jump into the video with John. Again, check out his channel. It's very, very good. And let's learn Sigma. All right, John, thanks so much for being with us today. I can't wait to talk to you about Sigma. But before we get into it, can you kind of let the audience know who you are and kind of a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I'm John Hoyt. I'm a Deputy Director of Information Security at Clemson University. Been with Clemson since 2007. Involved with information security since then. Started out as like an engineer doing intrusion detection and moved up through the ranks, I guess you'd say. Been involved with cybersecurity around since probably 2005.
We're talking Sigma today. This is kind of coming on the scene fast and furious and making it like a legit tool for blue team and SOC analysts everywhere. So can you kind of talk to us a little bit about, what is Sigma and like why is it so hot and powerful right now?
Yeah, and props to Tom from USC who let me know about it. And really what Sigma is it's taking all the log files that you have that you're getting all in this big repository of a SIEM or wherever you're putting those, and using Sigma to create the signatures, kind of like Snort. You would use Snort for signatures for network detection. You're using Sigma to do detection against the log files. So it's also a way to share those with multiple people. So instead of just creating a specific signature for Splunk that you say, all right, I'm going to look for these look in these logs in Splunk. Well, you can create it in a Sigma format that you can then share with anybody. You can share it with somebody that's using an elk stack. You can share it with somebody using whatever. And it's that generic format that takes it and converts it to whatever they're using. You can basically convert it from the generic signature to anything that they're going to use as well.
Yeah, so super powerful in that it allows collaboration and real fast adaptation for really any environment. So is it indicators and rules for kind of endpoint logs? Is it network logs? Is it any kind of log? What's the scope of it?
It's pretty much any kind of log, and across different platforms. There's network logs, there's Linux logs, rules for Linux logs, rules for network logs, rules for Windows logs. It's all over, and there's really no restriction on the type of logs it can look at. It can look at sysmon logs, it can look at audit D logs, it can look at application logs, which is really good. That's probably one of its biggest strengths. As you have all these app logs that are just there, you can have a Sigma rule that matches for things in applications as well.
Interesting. So is there, I have to imagine, since it's so interoperable, is there a repository or some type of shared collective that people are contributing to for these rules, or how is the community making this available in a way that's digestible and shareable?
Yeah, what I've seen is, Sigma itself is an open source repo, so it's out there on GitHub, and people are contributing rules and new rules. It is similar to Snort Like, where anybody can create a Snort rule, right? You can create a Snort rule and then share it with everybody. It's the same idea where I could create a Sigma rule and share it with either maybe specific people that are kind of in my context. For us, it might be higher ed, and I might say, hey, folks here in my higher ed circle, here's a rule that's pertinent to you. You might want to use it as well. Or you can just upload it to add to the repo that's out there for Sigma on GitHub. So it's pretty open. Everything's open about it, which is great.
That's cool. So how long does it take to, write a rule and share a rule? I mean,
it probably took me an hour to go through, but this is the first rule I've ever created. I've not actually created the rule, but it took me an hour probably just to go through, look at a template, compare the template, change that template to match what we're going to look for. And so that's something I'll show you too, is how you can do that and just take an example and modify it. So, and it was pretty easy, really. Just the formatting and the wording and the template itself is pretty basic. It's not super complicated. It's not programming. It's just formatting, which is great.
Yeah. So if you get like a template, you can start with that and kind of modify it for your needs. Okay, cool. So let me ask you, if you're someone, a lot of my audience are people who are interested in learning more, or they're junior level analysts and they want to, show up to work and be able to talk to the SOC manager about, hey, I learned about Sigma and stuff like that. is it approachable? Is it accessible for someone who's trying to learn about Sigma, who doesn't have a corporate environment to, implement in, I guess, can you kind of talk about like maybe what the accessibility path would be, someone who wanted to learn more about this and kind of add it to their skill set?
Yeah, definitely. So what I would recommend is just to, download the repo, and you'll need something that you can typically either a Linux machine or something you can run terminal commands with, right? Because it runs, I think, on Python 3 in the back end, so you need Python. But you're not doing Python coding. That's the good thing about it. The wiki itself is pretty helpful in walking you through how to run it against the rules. The rules are all there. When you download it, you'll see them. So what I would recommend is just going in there, running the commands you see in the wiki, playing with it, trying to convert a rule to different formats, and they give you good examples. And for my example, we use Splunk, and Splunk, you can play with Splunk free online. You can actually sign up for a 7-day free trial. I would recommend that, or Elk Stack, pick one of those and just play with them and get used to them. My familiarity is with Splunk, but definitely spin that up. It's pretty easy. You just sign up with your email, and I'm sure they're going to try to sell you something, but you can just sign up with your email, and then convert a rule. Just pick any rule, convert it, and then copy that and paste it into Splunk. And I'll show you. We'll walk through that, and I'll show you how to do it. But once you've copied that into Splunk, just try, tweaking it, seeing what happens when you search the data. The Splunk instance that they gave me, it has data in there. It's not blank. There's Zeek data. There's some Windows event data and stuff like that. So pick some rules that are similar to that, and then just test it. Just test, just like everything in security, which is great. There's sandboxes for pretty much everything.
Yeah.
So this is another way to have a sandbox. You just run it and try creating different rules, and then once you've converted a bunch of rules and tested them and you've got them working, then do like I did take one of those templates and work on converting that template to a new type of rule. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can be really straightforward. Start with something basic that you understand. So if Windows is your strength and you're like, okay, I understand Windows and I understand what remote desktop is, an RDP, and there's rules in there for those kind of things. And you're like, okay, if something tries to do RDP on my box, I would only allow it from these IP addresses or something like that, right? Something basic.
Yeah.
Take one of those simple rules that you kind of already understand what it's trying to do, and then tweak it and make it do something else. Maybe look for SMB, or maybe look for whatever, just something that makes sense to you.
Are there any downsides to it or pitfalls that you encountered that, someone doesn't have to live through themselves, because you can share that now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I've learned about it is just testing your rules, testing them and testing them and testing them. And what I mean by that is not just run it and see if you get results back, but really the best thing to do is to try to have some kind of mimicked activity that will validate that the rule actually works, right? So if you use Sigma to generate your signature that you dump into your SIEM, and you run it and you're like, okay, no errors, we're good to go. Well, but how do you know when something bad happens or that activity actually happens? How do you know it's actually going to trigger and alert you and let you know? So what I'd recommend is run it, make sure there's no errors, but also if you can, use something like Red Canary, the Atomic Red Team, to try to generate the activity that will actually trigger that alert, and then test the alert and make sure that it did fire when you thought it was going to fire. And that's just, I think that's just a great methodology anyways, is just trying to test your tools all the time and make sure that they do trigger. Because what you'll find is as you dump that signature, it's not going to know everybody's environment, but when you dump it in there, it's going to be pretty broad, and you're going to have to add a little context to that. And it might be a specific log location to go look for this data or things like that. So you got to tweak it. It's not going to be 100% out of the box, ready to rock, but it's going to get you, 80, 90% there. And then you have to just tweak it a little bit.
Can we jump into Sigma and actually take a look at it?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so this is the repo for Sigma.
Okay, so this is where folks need to go to get it. Get it going.
Yep, get it going. Clone this locally, so download it locally, so you have all the up-to-date rules. I would recommend cloning it because then you can update your repo when they add new rules easily, right? Which is where the most of the updates you'll find will come from. And getting started. So this section is pretty right spot on. You download it, you'll see the rules subdirectory. Let me just kind of show you the repo, the rules repo, just so you can kind of see all the
that's really
different rules.
that's where the money is, right?
Yeah, that's where the secret sauce is. But let me pick one just to kind of maybe show some of these. So Linux ones, they're all over the place. Some of them are specific APT related ones, where they have indicators for APT activity. One thing cool about them is they pretty much all reference some MITRE tag, like MITRE attack technique. They'll reference that in the actual the file itself. So like audit D, if you're running audit D, this is an example of a specific detection for audit D altering bash profile. So somebody alters their bash profile. Let me pick one that I was looking at earlier, and I think we talked about RDP. And this is a pretty basic example, but it's looking for the Zeek and the RDP log. So the RDP log is where Zeek looks for, and it sees any RDP activity on your network. It writes that to a log file called rdp.log. And this one specifically is, it's looking for connections from routable IPs, potentially something that is publicly accessible. So obviously, you don't want RDP open to the internet because it will get pounded and blasted.
Yeah.
And so if Zeek is monitoring the network, passively, and it sees activity that's RDP, well, you would want to know about it if it's not something that's internal. And so that's what this group here does. But you can see how it's not super complicated. I mean, it's really well written. It's well parsed out. You can kind of see the sections
the formatting
that make the difference.
is very easy to digest.
I'll jump into kind of the examples, but before I do that, what we were talking about earlier is the red team countermeasure. So this is what FireEye released. This week, last week.
Yeah, a couple days ago.
Yeah. And these are all the indicators that they release that have the MD5s for their tools. And, if you're looking for these, what you might look for, the hashes for these specific tools. And there's a lot of data out here, right? And like you just said, like, how do you take all that and use it in your tool? Like all this data, how do you use this in your tool, in your SIEM, right? There's a lot of information.
Yeah.
So, I thought about that and actually was thinking like, okay, how could we use it? And it may not be the best use case, but it is a use case where, going back to Zeek, there's a files log, and the files log, it basically, will hash and identify, basically pull the hash, the MD5 and the SHA-1 hash for any files it can potentially parse in protocol. So could be SMB, could be HTTP, could be something like that. So if it sees a file across the network, it's just monitoring the network, and it can grab the file and hash it, it will write that to its log, its files log, and say, hey, we saw this file, we saw this hash, we saw it going from this source to this destination. It's on the wire. If you saw any of these on the wire, you'd probably want to know about it. You probably want to know, why did somebody go download this? Is some reason this was passed across the network to my endpoints, right? Now, encryption is always, a factor, so you'd have to worry whether or not it was encrypted and the traffic was encrypted. You wouldn't be able to inspect it. If you had some decryption, which a lot of people do now, with a decrypted at some point, then you'd still be able to monitor for these files being passed back to the endpoint. Visual code. It's what the Florian recommends using this tool to that's what he uses to write the rules themselves. And so this is the rule we just looked at a little bit ago, right? And you can see it's basically in the Zeek folder, Zeek RDP public listener .yaml. It's a YAML file. So I took this one and said this was similar, close enough to a rule where I would want to go through and look for specific things, right? The not, but not instead of the not selection, but an actual selection. But like the same idea of look through the logs for this or this or this or this or this, right? Now, with the these MD5s from Fire, there's like over 600. So that could be that's probably not the best approach, because every time your search runs for these against the files log, it's going to be searching a lot of data at one time. So you may want to break it up, and there may be different ways to do it. Now, if you have ways to get hashes off the endpoints that's not across the network, that's probably the best way to do it, right? If you can get that hash files when it lands on a box and have that log somewhere, that'd be easier, or be better, be more less false positives, potentially more useful in your resources. But it's a potential way you could do it. It's not going to hurt to do it that way. You just got to be cognizant of the many hashes that you're going to be looking through. So I took this and I started creating this alert here. My first rule with the Sigma, so it's not pretty, but like I said, it was just something to learn and something to play with it, to get used to it. And they walk you through, giving it the title, giving it the status, experimental, giving it a name. And then you mentioned too the references. You can go out and look at these and find out more about what these hashes mean, right? Which is awesome. Tags are a little tricky, because the tags I know are tied to the MITRE framework, but if you look over here at these examples, I don't know. I couldn't find a good reference point, and I'm sure it's out there, but in the time I had, I didn't find like which one would I want to use for these, right?
Yep.
Because there's a lot of different ones for these tools. But anyways, I just kind of made it broad here. Author, date, and then you get into the log source itself. So, we're using Zeek. We're going to use the files log, basically. Where are the logs going to be? If you look at this one, this was Zeek and RDP, right? So the RDP log. And then what your selection. So basically, what are you going to query for? What in the files log are you going to search for, right? Just like we looked at with the RDP. So the field itself is MD5. That's the field that you look in the files log, you'll see MD5 equals blob, whatever that is, right?
Yep.
And then you give it, all the data that you're going to be searching for. And I didn't give it everything because it was big already. I just gave it a big chunk of it. And one thing too, if you do have a lot, just to note, you can see it's formatting here. These dashes are necessary. That's just the way it's set up. You can see here, they're here as well. I didn't try it without dashes, but I think it looks like they're necessary. So I had to put those in there as well. And then everything in single quotes. And then your condition. So if you look at this example here, this said not selection. So everything was going to be not, and then a big group of these is an or statement. And I'll show you that. But mine, I wanted to do a selection. I wanted to do where it actually equals, where MD5 equals this or this or this or this. So I just modified that. And in their documentation, they tell you can do starts with, ends with, select, all these different modifiers you can do on the data that are pretty straightforward, nothing crazy. Either it contains, you can do wildcards before and after, those kind of things.
Awesome. Yeah, super powerful.
Yeah. So fields is basically because you can see here what you're going to write out to look through, and this one was source and destination IP. For me, ones that maybe make more sense were the MD5 field itself and the transfer host and the receiving host. Like who sent it, who received it.
Yep.
If there are any false positives for this one, I couldn't think of anything that would be obvious because it is an MD5. If you see that MD5, it shouldn't be, it should be, a legit MD5 hash. So I didn't think of anything that would be fine. If you see it, it's probably the actual file. Why it's being sent is another question.
Right.
But I just kind of kept that as none. And then level high, this could be critical. It could be whatever's up interpretation you want to put there. You can change it, and documentation tells you, whatever you want to set that to. You're setting that. Now, that doesn't get posted out in your signature that you're going to create, but it's just that reference point. If I'm a SOC analyst and I'm looking at this, how important is this if this happens, right? As a reference.
Yeah.
So
looks good.
I'm in the Sigma Tools directory, and you'll see there's the Sigma C. I call it Sigmac. I don't know what it's actually called, but
I guess Florian gets to decide, right?
Yeah. And then, just noting that, that I'm in that tools directory, but you'll need to run it against the different rules that you're going to run. So in this case, we're going to run it against, let me bring up my cheat sheet so I can remember, because it is kind of long. And this is the config type that you're going to use, and I'll show you the other kind for like an ELK version. So rules, network, Zeek, and then I'll do the RDP one just to kind of show you what that looks like first. Public listener. So this is the YAML file, and you hit enter. So it's doing this magic. Okay, so here's your search string, and
custom
the
for
not
Splunk. Yep.
The not statement. Yeah. So all you can see how, and I'll put this in Splunk here in a second. But the not statement, this or this or this, and then everything that it had in those IP lists, what it's going to go OR through, and then it ends up, because it's Splunk, with a pipe to this table command, source IP, and dest IP. So it just says, just show me the source IPs and the dest IPs fields. So if you get any hits with this signature, it's going to say, well, here was a source, here was a dest, right? And like we talked about with the RDP, it was like, if you see anything that's not these, then I want to know about it, right?
Yeah, super, super easy. Converter, basically, it's perfect. I think the real power is the adoption from the community.
Exactly.
So there's so many signatures.
So here's mine, and it is going to be big because it's a lot of hashes. Yeah, but I'll put it in the Splunk and make it look a little better. But basically, I don't have the not statement like we had up here because I want to search equals.
Yeah.
Theirs also was starts with, I think, or contains, I can't remember, but you see how it's got a wildcard. It added that wildcard on every one of these, which is very, very powerful without you having to go do that. That's very nice.
Yeah.
If you had contains, I have an equals because it should be equal. But it will do the wildcard before and after. This saves you so much headache. And so it dumps this all in parentheses, and then it does the same thing. The fields that I entered that I want to see after it's done, dump these here. So pretty basic as far as converting these into a legit Splunk query or ELK query. And let me kind of show you what that would look like in Splunk.
Yeah, I mean, it saves you a ton of time. It saves you from typos, and it gives you access to a huge, it's like almost like a force multiplier by not having staff have to develop these rules. It's really, really impressive.
Definitely. So this is, I hope you can see this okay. Let me try and make it a little bigger.
Yeah, a little bigger is good.
All right, so this is that one rule that we were looking at. Now I had to change this one for this this Splunk instance. This is the free instance you can get from Splunk. You can go out there and sign up for it. Well, this is where it's important here, right? This is what Sigma gave me. If you recognize that, the IPs and the ORs, right, and the tables. Well, I had to change this part here, not the index so much, but the source, what the source was and what the report was, because they didn't have, for whatever reason, they didn't have RDP logs in. Maybe they didn't have any RDP activity. That's probably why. But they didn't have that in the Splunk instance. Okay, so I couldn't run it against that RDP.log instance. So, but that's okay. Well, they did have RDP, so I don't know why that file didn't run. But I just ran it against, if you know Zeek, there's a con log. and connections back and forth. It's just like who talked to who, how long kind of a thing, right? What connections happen. So this is where the tweaking of the signature comes in. You need to be able to say, well, what would I want to search against with this signature? And I'm saying I want to search against the con log where any responding port, the RSPP, is 3389, right?
Standard Microsoft Remote Desktop.
Yep. So if I see anything in the con log that is, from these, then I want to know about it. Now, I don't know if there was a wild card. It looks like some of these wild cards there wasn't anything that was like just wild card 172 for some reason.
When I saw the signature file, it looked like it was basically mapping the entire non-routable RFC 1918.
Yeah. And this is the data in here, it's not the best data, but it is something to play with and to test with, right?
Well, it shows you the complete picture, right? From signature to, running it in a SIEM.
Yep. And playing with it, you can dump data in this. So it's free for like 7 days or something. If you have data that you want to test with, you can actually dump it in here and play with it in here. So if you don't have the data you need, you could upload it now. It's Splunk, so you have to format it, make sure it gets formatted okay and all that mess. But just say you can do that and play with it and do the searching against data that is legit, right? In your environment, you would do this if you weren't just doing this in a lab, you would be doing this in your Splunk or your Elk stack as well.
Awesome. Yeah, this is great, John. Thank you so much for really walking us through the practical application of Sigma, as well as understanding kind of its importance and its value.
So let me just show you real quick what this looks like for the signature for mine. It's big.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's why this probably not the best way to run this signature. There's probably, it should run, and legitimately, if it sees that hash across the wire and something that it could interpret, it would be bad, and you'd want to know about it. So it is a legit signature. Is it the best and most efficient way to do it? Probably not, just because you can see I'm not even doing, half of them, right? This is just a subset of that big list of hashes. Could be other ways to do it, but just as an example. So, you run this, now I'm running this, you could run it for whatever time frame you're going to run it for. But the way you're really just testing the rule. Did I get an error? Did the Splunk search work like it's supposed to?
Yeah.
Right. Because if it didn't, then, you'd get, hey, what is the formatting here? What I've found so far is I've had no issues with the Splunk syntax. It's been great. It's more about, here I would add, and in this Splunk instance, it doesn't have the files log again for some reason, but I would personally add, where am I going to go look for this? You don't want to look against index everything, because that's everything. You would want to be as drilled down as possible and say, look in the files log for this data, right?
Sure. If people wanted to, engage with you, I know you started a YouTube channel to share your knowledge. How would you suggest people reach out and engage with you?
Yeah. So the YouTube channel I started, it's something that's been fun, and it's basically a way to share practical security tips and tactics. I call it security tactics. So if you go look at security tactics and John Hoyt, you should find it. But it's just a way to go out and give practical information to folks. So you can find me on there. You can also find me on Twitter. It's at PowderKeg, PWDRKEG. That's an old name that I've had forever, but yeah, you can find me on there.
So we've been talking with John Hoyt. John, thank you so much for basically pulling back the curtain on Sigma today for us. Thank you so much, John, for showing us Sigma, both kind of the theory behind it and how to actually utilize it in practice. I know if you're working in a SOC, you definitely can take advantage of this immediately. And I'm telling you, it's a differentiator if you can bring this up in a job interview. So that does it for this week, but it's time for our one cool thing. This week's one cool thing is library.tv. Now, this is a kind of streaming platform. It's akin to YouTube. It's supposed to be a YouTube competitor, but here's a couple differences with it. One, it's built on blockchain, and I'm not just using that as a buzzword. It's built on blockchain, and it's completely uncensored. So some of you may know that my channel got a community strike for dangerous material for teaching people how to build a phishing attack platform. Now, granted, I can see how that would be seen as malicious, so it's fine. But the point is, all of my content is also streamed to Library TV, and it's not censored, right? So you can see different content on there, and it's a cool platform. And they do something with like their own currency, like blockchain currency. I don't fully understand it. You can use it to like tip people or to I don't know. It's a currency all onto the platform itself. But Hackersploit, who's right here, he's got all his content on there as well. And it's just a cool little platform that's trying to compete against YouTube, which is obviously a juggernaut. So that's my one cool thing this week, worth checking out. Okay, so that does it. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, stay secure.